Hey everybody, welcome to the Modern Squid Podcast, where we get to know the people behind our favorite riders and brands. On this week's episode, we have MotoBob. MotoBob is a YouTuber and he does motorcycle reviews and news. He's also a really great guy and has some interesting insights on social media growth. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Because I did notice that in a lot of your social media, you don't really seem to bring a lot of your personal life into it. At least in the episodes I've watched, you've got 3 years of videos, so I could have missed stuff, obviously. But
yeah, it's not. Like actually, when I was when I first started out, we just had a few. London, the motorcycle crime used to be really bad. It's not so bad now. But 4 years ago, it was at its peak of thieves just running wild, and there was no way for the police to catch them really, because the traffic's dense and they would just kind of skip off through. And we just had a few problems with the bike outside, and then because I didn't have a garage at the time, so it was parked outside. It was just a few attempted thefts. They never got it, but so then I just got in the habit of being really private online. I thought, well, I don't really want to publicize where I live. And then when you start getting press bikes from manufacturers, I often post pictures inside my garage, like especially if I've got 3 or 4 bikes and they all look great together. You kind of want to share that on Instagram. But as a result, I think it's super important then to not make yourself a obvious or easy target,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I've kind of kept it quite private. But also vlog stuff just didn't do very well for me. The more I made it about the bikes, the less I'm in the videos, the better they do. So if you ever,
it's really interesting to hear that, because it kind of goes against the grain for some of the advice you get when you're reading about how to succeed in social media platforms, where they say you want to have a mix of 80-20 or something, of kind of like personal stuff versus on topic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does depend on what you hope to achieve, I suppose. But I always found if I ever went to a motorcycle show and took my camera with me and tried to vlog it, I'd get a lot of comments, or occasional comments, enough to make me think about it anyway, saying, I want to see less people and just shares the bikes. And I kind of read that a few times as I was starting out my channel and learning, what worked best. And then I really started using YouTube's analytics better. And when you start to look at audience retention and those kinds of things, and you start to see the things that you spend more of the time vlogging, those sections of videos, those don't perform too well. And so, yeah, I really started to shift my channel more towards nice B-roll of the bikes while I'm talking, and really making that a big part of it. And also I found that those videos as well, the vlogs, they are the ones where you over capture in terms of footage, because you film everything that you do in a day. So then you've got to download like 30, 40 gigs of footage, and then go through it all and find the good bits and try and piece a story together. And they are the ones that get the least results for me. So I'm spending days editing something that I know actually isn't really going to perform. And then that's when you start to think of it more from a business perspective of like, how much am I putting into this versus how much am I getting out? And if I really am serious about growing my channel, then I need to probably face up to that. And sometimes those are the most fun videos to make and quite creative. But if you truly want, it depends whether you're doing it as a hobby and for creative fulfillment. If you're doing it because you want to grow it as an income, then you have to sort of just stop being proud about it and be a bit more numerical, I suppose. So yeah, that exactly. Yeah. So that's why I don't really do any personal stuff so much. But I do enjoy watching vlogs that are more, behind the scenes. I just don't think it suits my channel.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think that, those types of channels that do well, that are vlogs, are people with strong personalities, thinking like the shade tree surgeons and the, people like that who just have these really over the top kind of personalities that seem to draw people in, because they seem to have an interesting mix on their end that works for them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I kind of remember watching something where he was saying that actually he kind of developed his personality on camera like that because I think he said he was inspired by sort of WWE and the way that the wrestlers before the match would really kind of, talk in this super hyped up persona. And so he started adapting that. And I think the videos that he does that are really stylized around that, you can kind of see that coming through. I think it's interesting when he's just on the road riding and it's less of that two camera persona, but you still kind of get some of it. And it's a bit of a halfway house of his natural personality. And then also, some of that. But yeah, it definitely works visually and sort of the way that he presents it as well, that kind of idea. And I've never really gone down that route. And I totally agree. I mean, there's so many kids now that if you ask them what they want to do when they grow up, it's like YouTube is a big thing. And as a result, a lot of people are starting vlogs. And I think if you're going to go about your vlog with that kind of day in the life type video, then you do need huge personality because there's so many people doing it. And actually, kind of my advice, if I was telling a kid to start a YouTube channel, I'd be like, just get really into something niche and get good at making videos and then combine those things. And there will be an audience, across the world for even that niche thing. There's a big enough audience usually to sustain it rather than trying to be just general because so many people are doing that. And I think I kind of got lucky with just experimenting with motorcycle videos because it is big enough that there's volume and you can grow your audience, but it is also you can niche down, and even within motorcycling you could go into adventure. There are certainly successful adventure bike channels or sports bike or track day or motocross or anything that you want, cruisers of course. So yeah, I think that's a better approach than just trying to be general, especially if you don't feel you kind of have to be like a stand-up comedian, I think, by nature to make a good, entertaining daily vlog.
And I think that it takes a lot of practice and effort, and a lot of people don't really take the time to do that, and they kind of get discouraged, when they first start out and they're not seeing any kind of traction, and then. They're not keeping the perspective in mind that some people have been doing this for years,
Oh yeah. I mean, I was looking at some analytics the other day. I don't know if I saved it on my computer, but at like the first, my revenue per year basically, and how many videos I made in each year. So I think I started in 2017. I think I made something like 100 videos. And I made about $50.
Wow, it's quite the ROI.
Yeah, exactly. and the crazy thing is, the second year I made something like 150, 200. So it didn't even discourage me.
Yeah.
And I think that year I made something like $800. So obviously building a sort of flywheel effect there. And then now it's more of it's a second income. And then hopefully next year full time. That's kind of what I'm working on at the moment, is moving over into it. So yeah, it takes a lot of grind, as you say at the beginning, and you've just got to enjoy it and enjoy the process of learning, and run it alongside another source of income, ideally, if you have it, while you learn what works, while you learn how to make videos. If you haven't come from a kind of videography background, learn to edit, learn about YouTube, and you'll get there. As long as, I think, like I said earlier, you're not too proud to stop doing the stuff that's not working for you, the stuff that's taking a lot of time, that doesn't perform, but you enjoy it. Well, that's cool if you're willing to be stuck in that first year of doing 100 videos and making $50. But really, as long as you're constantly trying new stuff and then iterating and chopping the bad stuff and doing more of the good stuff, anyone can get there. It's just being willing to learn and not being too proud, I think.
Yeah, and I think that when you're beginning as well, you don't always know what your niche is going to be, and I think that a lot of people kind of work that out as they go, partially through looking at analytics, but also partially based on what draws them to motorcycling and YouTube, right? And not to mention that sometimes the analytics are not as useful when you don't have the volume of data to analyze, you know, because once you've been around for a little while and you've published a number of videos and you have them kind of broken out into categories, I think it's a lot easier to look and see what's truly doing better than something else versus, you have 5 videos and 3 of them are one thing and 2 of them are another thing. It's kind of hard to really say if it was just that your lack of experience that's making poor videos that people don't want to watch, or are you not choosing the right topics per se, and I think that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, the fewer data points you have, then the less useful the very fine analytics are. I think really when you're starting out, you just go off views. If you've got a couple of videos that got, a few thousand or 10,000 or 50,000 views, then I would just be thinking, how do I replicate that? How do I expand on that theme or expand on that format or that topic? And all the other analytics, like you say, it's probably too nuanced at that stage if you're just looking to get a foothold and start to build a bit of momentum. So I'd just be looking at that and trying to replicate similar stuff. I think the other thing as well is that and this is possibly a caveat to that point, is that it's quite easy to upload loads of rubbish videos like I did and occasionally get one that does really well. But you also have to consider, is this replicable? Is this something that, is easy to shoot, that has like infinite depth, that I have access to? So, a good example would be my first video that hit like 3/4. I think I've deleted it now or unlisted it, but it hit something like 750,000 views after a couple of years. And it probably was the thing that encouraged me to keep going, but it was just a road rage incident that I caught on my GoPro while I was out filming something. And I just snipped that, uploaded it, and it did really well. Yeah, it did encourage me. I thought, wow, I can actually get like hundreds of thousands of views, but it's not replicable. And for some people it kind of is, but unless you just ride around very busy places and ride in a way that you might start to produce like reactions from people, then otherwise it's not replicable. And so actually you're better off removing those things from your strategy, if you will, and just looking at what are the things that are replicable. So for motorcycles, obviously reviews of bikes, there is kind of infinite depth in that subject area. Realistically, is any YouTuber going to get through every single motorbike that comes to the market each year? Probably not. There's always something else you can be doing. So I think that's why I started looking into that as more of a longer term plan than just the vlogs and the riding around and try and capture stuff. So that's the other thing. But really, YouTube, they've put it on a plate for everybody in terms of growth and the analytics they give you. You just have to pick popular topics that are replicable. So like I say, reviewing motorcycles, it's something that most people can have a go at if they can get access to the bikes, and there's a lot of bikes to go at. So as long as the topic is popular, then it's just about creating a good thumbnail and a headline to kind of tease people to click through and sort of get their interest. So rather than saying, Triumph Street Twin review, that's not really saying anything, but like why the Triumph Street Twin is the best whatever of this year or something like that, might get someone to click through more than just it's a review. And then it's about, once you've done that, kind of keeping people engaged on the video. So as long as the topic's big enough, you've got an idea of how you might actually get someone who's interested in that topic to click through, and then you deliver on that promise in the thumbnail, in the video, but also keep it really punchy and pull people through for as long as possible. That's all you need to do. And really separating inputs and outcomes, I think, is really important. So I know the ingredients there of a good motorcycle review video. Focusing on the views and how many subscribers you've got is, you know, that's kind of after the fact. What you really should do once you've hit upon a formula is like, okay, my metric for success now is how many of those videos do I create in the next 3 months or 6 months, and just consistently put out things that you know are probably going to be successful, and obsessing over the numbers that each one gets, as long as you're confident that it's a good strategy. You know, there's going to be ups and downs within a batch of 10, 20 videos. Really, you should just focus on consistently putting them out. And then after 3 months, 6 months, take stock, see how they've done, and then adjust your strategy again, and then go again and try and grow again. So that's how I've been trying to think about it, not get too discouraged if a certain video doesn't do great. Just really focus on consistent uploads and efficient production of the videos and that kind of thing. And then take stock I mean, you know, I'm not saying I never look, but I don't worry too much. A lot of people use Social Blade, for example, that shows your subscriber growth. Or that, I mean, that's the very last outcome of, did I upload videos? Did they perform well? How many views did they get? And as a result of that, how many subscribers did I get? And, you know, I always kind of say it's like expecting to lose weight by weighing yourself every day, looking at Social Blade. It really, you should be focusing on measuring how much exercise you do, you know, how much you're eating, that kind of thing, rather than just constantly looking at your weight every day. And that's Social Blade is that to me. It's just like, how many subs have I got? How many subs have I got? How many subs have I got? And it's so easy to get into a cycle of checking it constantly, multiple times a day, and see if your channel's growing. But the thing that's going to grow your channel is action. And that's, you know, going and finding ideas for videos, proactively trying to get hold of bikes, emailing dealers to see who will lend you one. You know, that's a better success metric to me as an input than how many subs you've got.
So that kind of brings me to one of the questions that I was going to ask you. When you first decided that bike reviews were going to be sort of your topic of choice, how did you manage to find dealers that were willing to work with you to lend you bikes? And how did you first start getting access to the bikes that they were lending you?
Yeah. So I get this quite a lot.
I'm sure.
I think for small motorcycle channels, it's the most frustrating thing because it's chicken and egg, right? Mm-hmm. I want to grow my channel by getting bikes so I can make videos, but my channel's not big enough, so they won't lend them to me. So it's you feel like you're kind of stuck in a catch-22 situation. And I think the thing that people do wrong is they get to like 1,000 subs and they think I'm monetized now. And then they sort of go in and ask for the bike, you know, and they're like, oh, I've got 1,000 subs. And really the PR guys and the dealers, they're used to working with, especially the PR guys at the manufacturers, they're used to working with, you know, the magazines, some TV shows, kind of a lot of them deal with celebs and supply bikes for them where they've got Instagram accounts with millions of followers. And I think you can burn your bridges by going in too early and just saying, can I have a bike for, you know, I met one guy who imports some Italian bikes here, and he was saying someone just asked for like a bike for a few months, just as a like long-term loan. And they had, like a handful of subs. He's like, I get it all the time. In what world do you just go and ask for things from people with nothing really in return? Because clearly your numbers suggest that they're not going to get a level of exposure that's probably worth the risk of lending you the bike. And so my advice really for people who are looking to build relationships with dealers and start producing content with their bikes is not to go and ask for stuff, but go and talk to them and find out like what bikes they sell a lot of, which bikes they struggle to sell. Find out if they're doing a bike night, an event, go and take some photos of it for free and upload them to your Instagram account and tag them, make a video of it, vlog it. I know the vlogs don't do very well. I've said myself, they don't do that well. But if your camera works good, if your editing is good, it doesn't really matter how many views you get. People are flattered to be in a nice video that looks a little bit cinematic. So you could even make a video of a bike night for the dealer, send it to them and say, you know, thought you might like this, I just popped down. That's the sort of thing that I would start to think about. It's like, how do I show that I'm willing to help their business? How do I show that I'm willing to provide value to them before I start asking for motorbikes to be lent to me? How do I show them that the quality of my content's good? How do I show them that I'm not going to wheelie it down the road and then slag it off and say it's a rubbish motorbike in my review, without really perhaps knowing what I'm talking about or respecting the brand? I mean, most bikes are pretty good now, right? Like the, you know, Harleys, for example, a lot of bikers, especially sports bikers, they don't like them because they think, you know, they're not really performance focused, but they sell hundreds of thousands of bikes a year. Like, people like them for a reason. So I think really, you know, you've got to show that you're coming at your reviews from an angle of like, what is it that people like about these? How can I get into that headspace? How can I understand and what brings people to this brand and this style of bike? Same with the PR guys as well. You know, I mean, that's a big leap to get to the point where you're getting invited to stuff. But like, I would never, with a small channel, just email a PR guy at a motorcycle manufacturer and ask for a bike. More often than not, they've contacted me because they've seen some other content that I've done that I haven't asked for a bike. Maybe the dealer is the stepping stone to getting bikes from manufacturers, you know, where they do lend them for a few weeks or a month. You show them the quality of content that you can do in an hour or two with a bike from a dealer, and then that then goes to show that if you have the bike for a little longer, you could do something even more impressive. So that's kind of how I go about it: is really build relationships, get to know the people, talk to them, find out what they're interested in, find out what kind of videos they like, and how you can maybe, you know, help them create that sort of thing for their, you know, show off their dealership in that way. And really it's just, it's about not coming at it with a me first mentality, I think.
So what was the company that gave you your first chance with a loaner bike?
I can't actually, so in terms of dealers, I mean, I used to do the cheeky thing and just go and pretend I was interested in buying it and put my GoPro on. And I actually feel quite bad about doing that now. I mean, on the one hand, I did buy a Triumph Street Twin after making a video about it, so I don't feel too bad. I was shopping for bikes. On the other, you know, it's a waste of the guy's time, and I think it's better to be upfront about it. So I can't really remember the first time I went to a dealership and honestly said, but now I don't do that. I don't really need to anymore because, once you get to a certain level of numbers, you can just send an honest email and say, do you mind if I borrow the bike? And I'll plug the dealership at the beginning. But in terms of manufacturers genuinely lending me bikes, it would either be some of the smaller companies here, like Sinis. They import Chinese 125s and kind of rebrand them and sell them at like £2,000 or £3,000. I'm pretty sure they lent me one of the first, and then the other is being Triumph, who, you know, I own a Triumph, so that got me on their radar, and I cover their bikes a lot. They're based in the UK as well, so, you know, if they're doing press events, unveilings and that kind of thing, then, you know, it's pretty easy for me to go there. They've been incredible in terms of sort of the support I get from them in terms of access to press releases and access to bikes. And I've been on a couple of press trips with them now. Went to Morocco on the Triumph Tiger 900 launch recently. I also went on the Street Triple launch last year. but that was on behalf of another channel called Bike World, who kind of sent me there. But I also have my kind of own relationship with Triumph now, and they've just been great to work with. I think they understand social media. There are boundaries, like like I think you have to respect the fact that you've been invited on these things, and so or the fact that you've been loaned a bike. I think. Well, when I say boundaries, there's nothing specific. I just mean that I think, I wouldn't go on a launch and create a kind of like crazy video where I was like riding really fast or that kind of thing. I think you have to respect that relationship. There has to be two-way. You're in a way indirectly representing the brand if you're on a launch or something. So create content that means you will get invited again. Although I don't think that necessarily has to be being entirely positive about the bike. I think they're open to honest feedback and criticism of the bike. I think it's just about the way you conduct yourself. But yeah, I think they've probably been the best. I kind of mentioned there as well about Bike World. That's another channel that's big. They sent me on a couple of trips, and that really gave me a boost as well. So the first press trip I went on was the Moto Guzzi V85 TT, the adventure bike they built. Bike World just didn't have anyone to go on it. So the guy that runs Bike World, he's called Alan. He dropped me a line and said, "Do you mind? Would you be interested in going and vlog it and give me the footage? I'll edit it for our channel, just see how it goes." And that was a real boost in terms of like building contacts and just giving me a bit of confidence to go and do it. So I'm actually incredibly indebted to them for asking me to do that. I think it just changed how I looked at it. That it was possible for me to go on these trips and kind of build my own channel and stuff. So I think that was probably more than getting my own press bike, loaned first. That was probably the biggest change from me in how I looked at the channel and what I was doing, I suppose.
Very nice. So how long have you been riding personally?
Not actually all that long. It's about 5 years now, but I was always around bikes because my dad's one of three boys, and they all rode motorbikes. So my dad and his two uncles. My dad and my two uncles, and but also I think my dad's dad and his dad all rode bikes. In fact, my granddad was a mechanic in the army, motorcycle mechanic, and he was in the army trials team as well. So I've got loads of great photos of the family all the way through. And so when I was a kid, me and my dad would go out on the weekends, almost every weekend for a ride. I'd be on the back, going to all the local biker spots up in the north of England, and loved it. But it's an expensive thing to get into. And I had other hobbies as well. I was really into playing music when I was younger. So when I would get a bit of money from doing a bit of weekend work or perhaps gifts from family at my birthday, might give you a bit of tenner in a card and you start saving it up. And I always had my eye on the next guitar that I was going to buy or something like that. And so I never really had the funds to do it. I cycled a lot as well. And that's another family, just me and my dad really, family hobby. So I guess in terms of actually getting around, like I would just ride my mountain bike around at school and stuff. So I never really got into it, it always looked prohibitively expensive. And then I'd always wanted to. And then, about 5 years ago, now that I was earning an actual, living, and I just thought now's quite a good time actually. So I just did the sort of direct access type thing where you go straight from no license up to full license quite quickly. And that was it. Never looked back, started making videos and that's it. So relatively inexperienced, I'd say.
Because it is quite, it is quite a bit of trust, right, for manufacturers to give a bike to someone, regardless of numbers on a YouTube channel. So it's, to me, totally.
Some of them you do have a insurance excess that you sign off. So there will be repercussions, and it's also, it's never going to be easy to have to go through that process. So I think the trust is there, but also it will be just as stressful for you if you did have a problem with the bike, or if it got stolen or something like that. You know, you feel it yourself when you get entrusted. I had a Goldwing here, you know, that was like a £30,000 bike. And I was just very cautious about double checking I'd lock the garage every night, you know. But yeah, in terms of riding skills, I mean, the thing is, I did get to commute until lockdown. I did get to commute for an hour across London and around London to different offices and stuff every day. And so in terms of hours in the saddle, as soon as I got my bike, that was it. I was just riding every day. And so whereas some people go out on the weekends in the summer, but you know, they don't go out in the week, and in the winter, they're not riding. I was riding through winter in all conditions. And prior to that, I'd been, you know, like I said, a keen cyclist. And so I was cycling in London, and although that's not necessarily the same in terms of obviously the power of a motorcycle, the weight of it, in terms of feeling invisible and trying to anticipate what drivers will do and trying to understand how people use the road and how people's mentality works. There's nothing as vulnerable as a bicycle. You don't have a massive loud exhaust or a horn to hit. You really are looking out for every little indication that something might happen that's going to put you in jeopardy. The other thing as well is grip and how you brake and how you corner. You know, I used to go out into the countryside when I was really training on my bike, cycling, and hurtle down the side of hills around here at ridiculous speeds, wearing just Lycra with tires that are this wide that have barely any grip. And it would be, if it was wet, I used to do triathlons and stuff, so I would be like, I need to train this weekend. I don't care if it's wet. I'm going out. And you only need to come off once or twice before you start learning that you need to be cautious on that kind of road, or maybe too much front brake if it's wet, or braking too late into a corner. You know, you have those accidents, and then when you're picking gravel out of your legs, you don't want to have them again. So I do think actually, yeah, from some perspectives that actually massively helped. But I think also just time in the saddle, commuting through London, I think as I look to spend more time reviewing bikes, you know, I always want to improve my riding. But it will only be when I go full time that I really have capacity to do that. We've got a 6-month-old baby boy, and then our daughter's nearly 3 now. So I work in the week, obviously. My wife's still on maternity leave with our son. And so she's got them all week. And the weekends, I just don't think it's really fair for me to go out and say, I'm just going to go and practice riding my motorbike. So really, yeah, it'll only be when I'm full time that I can afford to do stuff like track days and training days and adventure centers. That's the sort of thing that I think I'll end up going and doing. But I do really, really want to improve some of those riding skills. And so that's kind of a big goal for next year for me, I think. And there's endless stuff you can do, really, even in the UK, within a relatively close distance here. There are track day training schools. There are multiple of these adventure centers that manufacturers, I think, set up themselves to showcase their adventure bikes off-road. You know, there are motocross schools, there are wheelie schools, there are even like flat track racing schools as well. So I really just want to try and get around a few of those things. But I think the key thing as well, and that I've been thinking about a lot, is just buying a really shitty old bike that I don't care if I drop it, and fit some crash bars on it, and actually just go out and be a little, especially I'm kind of thinking off-road here, but you know, on kind of quiet trails, just being a little bit less timid with how I ride. I think for the road, you've always got to ride sensibly at well within your capacities, but it's difficult when you get loaned a bike and it's a brand new £20,000 adventure bike or whatever, to develop your riding that way. It's just not going to happen. You need something that you're not scared of, because when you crash off road, you realistically, someone like me, I'm not going to be going that fast. It will be coming to a stop quickly and then overbalancing or something, and it'll be embarrassing, and I'll crack a panel or something. But I'd rather do that on a beat up old bike than someone's brand new press bike. So that's something I'm thinking about as well. And maybe it might make an okay series as well, building a bike like that and then showing some of the kind of riding. But yeah, how about you? How long have you been riding?
I just started
not long.
So I learned how to make a motorcycle move in November in Nicaragua. A buddy of mine, he lives out there, and I went to visit him, and he had a motorcycle. And one day he said, "Hey, you want to learn to ride a motorcycle?" And I was like, sure, why not? So I hopped on, and I've driven a stick shift car before. So the shifting actually was super easy. Motorcycle shifting's way easier than shifting in a car, I think.
Agreed. There's less, you don't have to take your hands off.
Well, it's not 3D, like it's down or up as well, right? So it's. But interestingly,
when you explain it to someone who's driven a car, and you say you press down for first gear, and then you go back up through neutral to second, and they're like, wait, what? You go through neutral. It's kind of weird to explain, but I agree. Once you actually do it, it's it's intuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I assumed it was going to be harder than a car, just because I had seen my dad driving stick shift growing up, and you see it in movies all the time, where people show you the person's hand and you can see it moving. But at least in the shows I watch, no one ever shows you how they're shifting a motorcycle. They just show them moving. So I didn't even have the concept in my head of how a motorcycle shifted, other than I knew the clutch was on the handlebars or the clip-ons, whatever it is. So anyway, I learned in November how to make it move. And then I took my MSF course in end of March, beginning of April 2020. And then I bought my bike in April of 2020. And I kind of had the same sort of debate inside that you were talking about, regarding whether I should buy something older that I don't care about dropping or go with something new. And I ended up going with a year-old Harley. And it was basically pristine. I think there's 500 miles on it. It was a bike that someone probably just tried out, didn't like it, and sold it back. But in any case, first thing I put on it was crash bars, because I knew, brand new rider, there's no way I'm not going to drop it at some point. And I'm so happy I put them on there, because even though I go and I do a practice run every single time I get on the bike before, I go somewhere, or if I get back from going somewhere, I still have moments where I make dumb mistakes. Like when I went to a park out here, and I was doing a moto vlog actually, and I'm riding around, and everything in the park was paved except for one road off to the side. And the sign, I don't remember exactly what the sign said, but it seemed like it'd be something interesting. And I looked at the gravel road, and it seemed super hard packed. It looked more like just a hard road with some gravel on it. So I was like, whatever, I'll try it. I'm going down the gravel road, and it quickly becomes about 6 inches deep of just loose gravel. And I thought I was stopping slowly, but I didn't stop slow enough, and boom, down goes the bike.
Oh no.
It was so slow of a drop that I didn't even fall down. Like I just kind of stepped off the bike, and the bike went down. And the other time, I've dropped it twice now. The other time I dropped it was going through a neighborhood out here, and speed limit's like 15 miles an hour. I'm not sure what that is in kilometers, but it's not very fast.
We're in miles anyway. In the UK, we booked the trend of Europe, and actually we're in.
Oh, perfect.
Wrong
side of the road, but the right side
system.
of
the. We use centimeters and meters for most things now, but miles on the road. I didn't make the rules.
Well, if I'd made the rules, we wouldn't have been doing miles per hour either. Then kilometers makes way more sense. But in any case, I was approaching a roundabout actually, and there was a truck also approaching the roundabout, and I did not have a yield sign, and I was way closer to the roundabout. So I intended to go ahead and just proceed into the roundabout. Well, I must have been going too slow for this truck, because he hit the gas to try to beat me.
Right.
But I was already slightly leaned in, getting ready to enter the roundabout. And so I had to hit the brakes. And even though I've practiced emergency stopping over and over and over again, I always practice it fully upright. So this time I was leaned over a bit, and so there's just too much brake for that lean angle, and I dropped the bike, and I think I was probably, I don't even know how fast I was going, but I barely slid, you know. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, I'm sure glad I have crash bars yet again. And number two, holy cow, these pants actually work.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think sportly that is the exact sort of thing that I was talking about with cycling. If you brake on a road bike, a sort of sporty bicycle like that, the contact patch is so small, yet obviously you can get a big lean, and the brakes are still relatively powerful. And I just got to learn after many falls that braking when you're leaned over, it rarely ends well. And it makes me think of recently I had the KTM Adventure 390, so a mini adventure bike. And you have to go up to the Midlands. It's about a 2 or 3 hour ride from London to where the KTM garage is, where they keep all their press bikes. So I was going to drop it off. I'd left my bike with them while I borrowed it. As always, whenever I have to do a 2 or 3 hour ride up the motorway on a specific day, you know, you're booked in to hand over the bikes. It just rained so bad. Like it can be a great 2 weeks while I have the bike, but on the day where I'm committed and there's no way on the day that I can change it, the forecast will change and it will just get. So anyway, and I got all the way there. I'd fueled the bike up. It was raining, but I'd stopped to fill it up. And I was a mile away, just pulling out the petrol station. I set off down the road from the petrol station, and you know when you can barely see anything, and I was kind of like, I could feel it dripping down my back and stuff, and I was just tucked in. I was just like, I just want to get there now, and sort of accelerated up to what I thought was the speed. And then the visibility was bad, and I just thought, oh my God, all of a sudden, there was a roundabout that I just hadn't really seen coming. I didn't really see the signs because there was just so much going on with the rain being so heavy. And I just instinctively stood the bike up because I could see the road curving round, but I didn't realize it curved round into a roundabout. And so I stood the bike up and just went on the brakes. But I was going towards, obviously, the kind of outside lane. But it just takes a bit of nerve, I think, to trust that you are going to stop. If you stand it up in a straight line, get on the brakes, and the weight goes over the front wheel and it really grips in, you're really likely to stop before you hit the thing that you're looking at, unless you're doing a crazy speed. And actually, it's better off to do that, stand it up and brake hard, than it is to try and, you know, as you say, brake going around the corner. But we all learn from, you know, like I say, I wouldn't have done that, I don't think, if I hadn't been sliding along in my tiny Lycra shorts down a country lane in Kent somewhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, I fully expected that I was going to make stupid mistakes because I'm just too new for it to be reasonable for me to have the muscle memory built in, you know. Totally. I'm just glad that all of the things that have happened so far have been very low speed, very low stakes, you know. I mean, dropping the bike before I get hit by a truck, I guess it's a little bit more high stakes, but I was going so slow, it didn't really matter. I should have, like you said, stood the bike up before hitting the front brake, but I didn't expect him to accelerate like that, you know?
Yeah. And there's so many things, aren't there, like where, of course, one of your reactions is to be a bit annoyed at the other driver and think, well, why did he start to accelerate? But then also, I think as a biker, like I was saying earlier about cycling in London, you have to expect the unexpected, expect no one seeing you. And so there are just so, you know, it sounds like you have the right mentality of sort of analyzing everything that happened. And then what could I have done? Well, I could have expected him to speed up, like, because you expect the unexpected. I could have stood the bike up because now you know that, look, in that leaned over, there's just not that much grip. Like you say, though, you were traveling at an appropriate speed. So maybe you could have, you know, the crash wasn't so bad and maybe you did have time to stand it up. But I think one of the things that I found the most useful is a book called Twist of the Wrist. It's like an iconic riding manual. And there is a video version. But the video's not aged very well, but the book still reads pretty well. And I think although it's focused on riding a motorbike on the track, the teachings in there are absolutely 100% applicable to road riding. And the big theme is, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, have you?
I watched the movie.
Well, you may remember then that they talk a lot about survival instincts. So, if you're going around a corner and you think that you won't make it around the corner, your survival instinct is to grab the brakes. And actually, that's the wrong thing to do. But it's just that kind of inbuilt human instinct that if I'm going too fast and there's danger, I need to go slower. And actually, in that situation, they say you've more chance of making it around that corner if you just don't touch the brakes and lean the bike further. And actually, if a top racer or really skilled rider was riding your bike, probably they would be able to get around the corner. Like most machines are much more capable than the level that most people are riding them at. So actually just a few times that I feel like that's got me out of trouble, that idea that override those instincts. And certainly that tip that if you're in a corner and it tightens, for example, that's the one where you're on a road that you don't know. It looks like a shallow corner and it gets tighter, and you're drifting towards the outside. The instinct is to hit the brakes, but actually I'm sure that nugget has saved me a few times because I've just thought, don't touch the brakes and just lean. And eventually you'll get around. But I really, thoroughly recommend that book. I've watched a bit of the film, but I think some of those things as well are best read. It's really like reading a novel versus watching the Hollywood adaptation. You don't ingest it in the same way, although it can be still a fun thing in its own right to watch. Like sometimes when you read a book, you live it, don't you? You really kind of, and you read a bit one night and then the next day you're still thinking about it and then you read it again. And I think it is similar with that book. Actually, I felt like reading it a bit at a time and then going away and riding and then reading the next chapter, and you start to think, oh yeah, I do those things. I do instinctively want to pull the brakes. Or I can't remember the other survival instincts they talked about, but I think the big one really is that pulling the brakes when you ought not to.
And the sad part is I know that I should have stood the bike up. I knew it right afterwards. I didn't really blame the truck. As a matter of fact, I blamed complacency because I was going through a neighborhood and there was so little traffic and everything was moving so slowly that I wasn't really on high alert. And the approach to the traffic circle seemed so routine that I just, I let my brain relax too much. And so I was looking towards the turn instead of looking at the oncoming traffic because, again, I was complacent that the truck would do the normal thing at the roundabout. And I should have been keeping a good eye on the truck up until I was positive that everything was going to happen the way it should. And again, I should have stood it up more. But yeah,
it happens.
It is what it is.
Although I'm talking about like, oh yeah, I've read this book and I cycled loads. I've made loads of mistakes. I've dropped bikes. We've all done it. And even now, I still do stupid stuff where I'm just like, what was I thinking, or why wasn't I paying attention? And to be honest, though, for me, most of the stuff happens when I'm just moving bikes. I spend so much time filming them and moving them around at low speed and kind of trying to get them into awkward situations because I think it'll make a good shot. That even now I'd still do stupid stuff where I'm, put the side stand down and it's not level. And then I'm like, whoa. But yeah, and I've had my fair share. I've done the exact same thing as well that you're talking about pretty much, in that I was on a bike and I was filtering really between stationary traffic. I was there's 2 lanes either side. It was really in the middle of London. It was wet, but also there was a building site nearby, so there's a lot of like silty debris on the road, and it was curving round to the left. And I was just thinking as I was riding, I was like, I should go slowly here because there's a good chance someone else is filtering coming the other way. And then after I thought that, a couple of seconds later, someone was there, and I just instinctively grabbed the brakes. And I think because I was filtering on the paint, on the white line pretty much, and it was silty and wet, front end just went. And I was so fortunate. I just slid in a straight line, was slightly arcing round along on my bum, kind of slowly, with the bike slowly. And I didn't hit either cars either side. I was so lucky. I was going so slowly, it wouldn't really have caused any damage to any of the other cars. It would have just been the drama of having to inspect their car. And they, like, some people, they're so like, if there's a tiny scratch, they'll be like, all right, send me your details, we'll make a claim, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I was super lucky. And also not to get my leg squished or something, but it happens. It just happens. And ultimately, I think you have to just try and minimize the chances of it happening by riding as well as you can. And this is, again, why I'm, always thinking, well, how can I improve my riding, and what could I do when I have time to do that? But also at the same time, it is unfortunately part and parcel of it. As long as you do what you can to minimize the risk by keeping your speed in check, then hopefully you won't have any major accidents. But expecting to own a motorbike, like you say, and you said yourself, you expected to come off a few times, having a motorbike and not expecting to occasionally end up on your bum, I think is optimistic. It's unfortunately part of the process of learning and stuff. So, it's just minimizing it, I think.
Yeah. I've tried enough new things in my life that, I would be more shocked if something didn't go wrong during the learning process than when they do go wrong. Because like you said, it's all part of the process. I mean, most things in life are skills, whether you think of them as skills or not, and skills are developed through practice and experience. And when you're brand new doing something like motorbikes, you've got no practice or experience except, maybe, tangentially through bikes, like bicycles or something, But that kind of leads me to another question that I ask everyone on these podcasts. Are you more ATGAT, or would you say you're more squid, or do you find yourself in between?
So, as I've said, I actually think that's a really good question, because it changes. One thing I said earlier was about when you borrow a bike from a brand or from a dealer, that's definitely a consideration for me. I think it's something that will get picked up on in the comments, whether you like it or not. And I think people should choose to ride in, as long as they're complying with the law, which is wearing a helmet, basically, most places. Then I guess that's fine by me, and they get to choose. I also think, like I say, I've cycled down the sides of hills and mountains where I've reached 60 miles an hour on a bicycle in Lycra. And you see that all the time in the races and stuff. It's easy to get to those sorts of speeds on the right road. So I always feel much safer on a bike with good brakes and a lot more grip and then a lot of gear. So when I'm on camera, I will tend to wear full gear. And I think it is generally safer. I don't think it is. I know it's safer. But at the same time, if I'm just going to the shop around the corner, and this is the thing, this is the second part of ATGAT, isn't it? All the gear all the time. You never know when you're going to have an accident. But I can't deny that if it's a summer's day and I just need to go to the shop around the corner and I just stick my helmet on and I've got a t-shirt on, it's an incredible feeling when there's hot weather and you're just riding along in a t-shirt. I don't know why, it just feels great. And so I understand why people do it. I think there's hopefully more gear on the horizon though, that helps people kind of do that. So one thing that I need to get actually is Nox armor. So KNOX armor. In the UK, actually, they're based up in the north in the Lake District, I think. They make really cool stuff, kind of like high tech looking clothing. Like they make these hand-droid gloves, they're called, and there's like a piece of armor that kind of moves with your fingers. It looks like something out of a sci-fi film. But one thing they make is a vest, like a mesh vest that just holds shoulder protection, elbow pads, and back protector, and it may even have chest. I'm not sure. Holds it in place, and then you can wear whatever you want over the top, and it's so low profile. You know, armor's really pretty thin now. That really you could wear that in summer and throw a t-shirt over it, or a shirt, something loose, or you know, you could even wear just a hoodie, and you're pretty much, apart from like maybe abrasion resistance on the parts that don't have the armor, you're pretty much as protected. And I think, you know, that's pretty great. And as for jeans, I mean, I work with Pando Moto, they're called, and they sent me a couple of pairs of jeans recently, and they're as good as a pair of Levi's for wearing off the bike. So really, I always feel like some days if I haven't got a clean pair of regular jeans, I might just grab those if I need a pair of jeans. And when I was commuting, I would just leave them on in the office because they're a little thicker, the fabric, but the cut's so good now. I remember seeing when I was with my dad on his bike going to motorbike shows, and you know, 20 years ago rather, you would see a stand that says, look, this is like Kevlar motorcycle jeans. They're pretty much as protective as leathers, but they look just like jeans, and you'd feel them. They felt like crisp, and the cut was always very loose and a bit weird. Now we're at the stage where the jeans are pretty close. You can get some nice trainers and boots that look pretty much like the same as non-motorcycle specific protective stuff. I think it's just the top half. Obviously you wear a lid. The gloves are cool as well. Like you can get good gloves. I think it's that top half for people. So I think products like that, the Knox vest, I can't remember the exact name of it, maybe we'll help people come around to kind of wearing more protection and still kind of like expressing themselves with whatever clothes they want to wear. What about you? I mean, after a couple of little spills like that, I think it does make you
so I
cautious.
Didn't ride motorcycles for years, not because I didn't like them or think they look cool or whatever. It was purely based on the fact that I didn't think that the fun would outweigh the danger. I've always thought that motorcycles were very dangerous, and you know, they are dangerous, but it wasn't until I actually rode one that I figured that the fun to danger ratio was worth it to buy one. So my own way of sort of reconciling that with myself is I do ATGAT basically. And I live in Phoenix, so it gets so hot out here. We broke a record for the number of days this year. We had over 50 days that it was over 110 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, what's that in Celsius?
Like 55, 60 Celsius probably.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was one of the hottest. Well, not one of, it was the hottest summer on record.
Wow.
And I still was doing ATGAT. You know, I have a mesh jacket and it's got armor in it. I've got the pants, and they are still thicker than normal jeans. You're right. They are better than, like if I look at some YouTube videos, even 5 years ago at some of the jeans, you could tell pretty well that they were,
you know, that extra thickness is nice in London, you know, because it's never really that warm. We have had a warm summer as well, but I can imagine in that heat, you know.
Well, it's already hot, and then you know my Harley is air cooled, and when you stop in traffic, that heat just comes right up and starts baking your legs. And so you have the sun beating down, cooking your legs from the top, the engine's cooking your legs from the bottom, and then you've got that extra thick, just a little bit extra thick fabric of the jeans to keep all that heat in there to roast you like an oven. It can get kind of miserable, but as long as I'm moving, it's actually not that bad. And I found that I burn like crazy. I mean, I am Scottish, Irish, German, and Swedish. So basically, and any skin type that roasts quickly in the sun, that's what I've got. So I would either have to wear a whole bunch of sunblock or be covered up anyway. And so to me, I'm like, well, this kind of kills two birds at one stone. One, I'm not going to come back lobster red from my ride. And two, I'm kind of protected. But I'm also kind of like you in that I think that motorcycles aren't safe, and if people have a different level of risk tolerance than me, then so be it. I mean, that's their choice. I'm even against laws making people wear things like helmets because, frankly, again, everyone has to make their own decisions in my mind about what level of safety and risk they're willing to take.
Yeah. I mean,
So.
the debate around helmet, there's not, I guess in the US, you have some states, right, where you don't have to wear a lid. And so that creates a debate around whether that's appropriate or not. In the UK, there's it's by law everywhere you wear a motorbike helmet. And so there's no debate around that. But there is a big debate around cycling because it's not currently a legal requirement. But some people seem to think it is. And it's so nuanced that the discussion around it, on the one hand, there's a proven link between head injuries being, lower if people wear helmets, of course. On the other, the health benefits of cycling and the environmental benefits are huge. And the less kind of restrictions and barriers you put on cycling, the more people will take it up. And so, it's difficult to find that balance, but people are very passionate about either stance. And so I can imagine that the motorcycle helmet one being the same. But personally, I come down on the side of, letting people choose, as long as the benefits of helmets are well publicized. My kids, I would always have them wear helmets while they're little because they're not good at riding bicycles. They suck.
Well, and they're, they don't have the life experience or, their brains aren't fully developed yet. They can't make these kind of life altering decisions, in my opinion, at that age. So that's the kind of the role of the parent. You keep them safe until they're old enough and have enough experience in life to make their own decisions about these sort of things.
For sure. So, it's a tricky one, but I mean, I think for me anyway, a helmet's the bare minimum on a motorcycle. Although, again, I was just saying, actually, riding around in a t-shirt, occasionally, if I've just, had to move a bike, if I've been wherever, maybe I'm just moving it across the road or whatever, riding a motorbike without a helmet, even at 5 miles an hour, just is such a different feeling. And so even those people who live in states where you don't have to wear one by law, and they kind of really like not wearing one, I think I understand the feeling that it probably gives you. But just for me, it's just this, it's far too risky.
Yeah. Well, and the ironic part about the whole situation is that a lot of the people who don't wear gear in their neighborhoods or, somewhere where they say they're not going very far. And the reason that's ironic is that the studies show that you're more likely to be in an accident near where you live. And neurologically, the brain fills in gaps more often the more familiar you are with a place. So a car is less likely to see you even if they look at you because their brain is looking for other cars. And since they don't recognize a motorcycle as a car, the brain just fills in almost like a Photoshop thing where it does
an empty road. Yeah.
And it just like sticks in road instead of a motorcycle. So you'll look over, you'll see them. It looks like they're looking left or right or whatever, and they see you, but they don't see you because their brain just fills it in because they're so familiar with that area. And the brain is just looking for cars. So anyway.
Yeah, it's super interesting, definitely. I think that's the thing that I think, I was saying how you ride and your mentality is probably more important. Well, obviously the gear helps you if you have an accident. So I'm not saying it's not important. And I think personally, as I've said, I think I prefer to wear all the gear, but riding with the mentality and trying to stay alert to stop yourself getting into an accident in the first place is just the biggest thing you could do, obviously. But it's so difficult to maintain that awareness all the time. I kind of hope that, a lot of motorcyclists, and I know this from my YouTube comments, are resistant to technological kind of advancements. There's a lot of people who feel that, bikes being as simple as possible, no traction control, just you're connected to the bike and and that's the best thing possible, really. And they want all the money that they spend on the bike, the manufacturing budget for it, to go into the best brakes, the best suspension, mechanically, the best engine, that kind of thing, and less of the electronics. And I totally understand that. My first bike didn't have ABS. In fact, possibly yours doesn't, if it's yeah. And
it was an option. I think that for that model year for 2019, you do have the option to add it. I think it's like $600 or something for the ABS.
Here it's a legal requirement now to sell a bike. It has to have ABS. So, if you go to a Harley dealer, you can only get ABS equipped bikes. I get it though. Yeah, I do think for a more engaging ride, the less there is there to distract you, the better. And also, you do want to learn to ride the bike, as I've said, and find where those limits are. But I do also see the place for tech to try and help avoid some of these kind of incidents. And I think the times when that stuff is most useful is probably commuting and touring, because those are the times that you zone out more so. Sure, like lean sensitive traction control and ABS, if you're riding quicker than you ought to because you're on a Sunday blast with your mates and you push it a bit too hard, perhaps those are also useful. But I think personally, and like you've just said, it's that when you're a mile from your house and you switch off a little bit, or if you're doing a long shift in the saddle, obviously you've got to take regular breaks, but still a long day is a long day. It's different to a short ride. And so for touring bikes, commuting bikes, I think it can be a good thing. And there are, I think this year we'll start to see the first bikes with adaptive cruise control, for example, where it just gauges the distance, radar enabled, so gauges the distance from the car in front and adjusts your speed to maintain a safe distance. And I think also those same bikes are having rear equipped radars to warn of potential rear collisions. Those things are amazing. I think I also read about something that Bosch were working on with Ducati, which was for cars and motorcycles to be equipped with a Wi-Fi kind of technology, Wi-Fi enabled technology, because the Wi-Fi signal is about the right range for kind of collision detection. And so let's say you're coming around a corner and something else is coming the other way, it could flash up on your dash that there's oncoming traffic because 50 meters up the road, it can see that coming. Same for the car. If it was at a T-junction and they were thinking about moving off, that distance of technology could give them an appropriate warning that they shouldn't move off because something's approaching from the right, so they might not cut across the front of the motorcycle. I don't know what happened to that project. I read about that a year or two ago, and I think they demoed some of the technology or at least showcased it at one of the big shows. But yeah, I get that people don't want, you want to get away from your phone and from your computer and just be on your bike and have a bit of downtime and thinking time. But at the same time, I think for certain applications, primarily, I'm thinking commuting in the winter, after 5 o'clock here, it's pitch black in the winter. Those sorts of things can be a massive help. So I'm interested to see how that side of things develops for sure, and it gives me more stuff to talk about in videos anyway. So
yeah. So I think it depends on why we touched on it earlier, right? It depends on why you're buying a bike. I got mine for recreational purposes. So I wanted a very analog machine. You were talking about how a lot of people understand why people like Harleys. Well, for me, it was, number one, I'm a photographer, so I wanted something that was going to look cool to take pictures of. Right. And I think most sport bikes look like a variation of a bug to me, like a transformer bug. Yeah. They look fun to ride, but as far as aesthetically, they just don't appeal to me. But also, there's just something to me appealing about just such an analog machine, something that hasn't changed that much in so long. I don't think that I would ever want an electric bike because you wouldn't be shifting gears, and it's part of the fun for me, shifting gears. Yeah. And to think of like the live wire or something. Do I think it'd be fun to ride? Sure. I just don't think I'd want to own it. It'd be something I would probably rent for like a weekend of fun. But something to have as my own to play with whenever I wanted. I think I'd be disappointed by the experience just because it doesn't have what appeals to me about a motorcycle.
But potentially, I mean, there's one manufacturer that I have borrowed a bike from they're called Artisan Electric, I think, here in the UK. Very small. Again, importing Chinese-made bikes, I think. And they lent me a supermoto-style electric bike. It was only like learner power. It's really intended for commuting in the city. But next year, they've got a version of that bike coming with a clutch and gearbox. It's electric, but... And I was kind of asking them, well, what is that about? Like, how does that make it better? Because as far as I know, like the electric motor, it just kind of goes, and they say it doesn't really offer any performance benefit. If anything, it's slightly less efficient. It's just that people want it, and the motorcycle market is quite traditional and it's older. So trying to get people to sort of, I was going to say shift over and then I stopped myself. You have to do some stuff like that. So it's a shame that there's no performance benefit to them, because I think, it's engaging, isn't it? Picking the right gear and finding that sweet spot of power. If you are riding a little bit quicker, that's all part of the fun. In fact, it doesn't even, you don't even have to be riding quick. It's still fun to go through, up and down the gears. It's the sound it makes as you downshift. I totally get that. I think also, you said sports bikes look fun to ride, and they are in a way, but I've got a Triumph Street Twin, which, like a Harley, for such a large capacity engine, the 900s and 1200s, they make relatively small amounts of power, but it's all about the torque. And I think a big twin, a torquey twin on the road is actually more fun to ride than a revvy sports bike. So whenever I've borrowed sports bikes that have been, I've ridden one that recently was the MV Agusta Brutale 1000RR. It's like 200 and something horsepower. It's very hard to know how to make a video about a bike like that on the road, because legally you can't do what it can do. And so you end up just riding around everywhere at a quarter of what it's capable of. And occasionally you'll get a bit of quiet road and you'll open it up. But all you can do if you review sports bikes is say that it's faster than the other one. And if you do that on the track, then that's appropriate and probably a lot of fun. If you're doing it on the road, it's not going to lead you to a good place, just trying to demonstrate how these bikes go faster and faster. And so that's why I'm really interested in safety tech. That's why I'm interested in adventure bikes that have like tech that helps you navigate and keeps you comfortable. It's why I like retro bikes, because they're not about speed. They're about looking good and about a sort of feeling they give you, and about creating a certain vibe, I suppose. And so really a lot of the other categories of bike, commuting bikes even, I mean, I commuted a lot, so I can comment on what makes a good solid commuter. I much prefer reviewing those bikes. It's not to say that it's not fun to go and ride a sports bike for a few hours, but I just don't know if I truly believe that on the road that they're fun to ride. I think they're either underwhelming to ride because you're only using a small amount of the power, or they're dangerous to ride. and those are the only dangerous and a bit scary and risky, because you might lose your license.
Or your life.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing as well. Like, the more that YouTube becomes a career for me, obviously the risk of personal injury is obviously a big one, but not even that. Just getting caught speeding is second gear at like half of the amount of revs that some of these sports bikes will do, and you're already enough above the speed limit that you would get in some serious trouble. Mm-hmm. And that's just not an option now. if you make a career out of riding motorbikes, you can't be getting a ban. Then you're scuppered. So
yeah.
So I've just tried to really not avoid that side of it. I like to make videos about those bikes, about when they get announced and the specs. But as I was saying, I think I'll focus on the other bikes and try and keep the sports bike riding. I like them. Maybe I need to, if I've got more time to sort of ride on the track, I can do more of that stuff and develop it. But even then, there are some people reviewing track bikes that they're so experienced that I can't really make that kind of video where I know that like twiddling a certain setting on the suspension like will improve your lap times by a certain amount. Like I'm not there, and I doubt I ever will be. Maybe many years down the line I'll get to that level, but that's best left to other people for me. And I'll go slow on the road and just enjoy the ride and the tech and the gadgets and the looks of the bike. Like I like taking photos as well. So the looks are a big thing for me, and that's what I hear from most shops and dealers as well. They say most of the bikes we sell, people choose it based on what they look like.
Well, like we covered a lot, but you can't do a lot of what these bikes are designed to do on the road legally. If it's not, for instance, like a supermoto, I mean, if you're popping wheelies down the road, eventually you're going to get in trouble,
Oh, yeah.
And a sport bike, if you're using the machine for what it was designed for, which is going fast, eventually you're going to get in trouble for it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that it's probably as decent a metric as any other for buying a bike. Like I like the way this one looks, because they'll all get you from A to B. And they've all got their pluses and minuses.
Because it's like nobody, especially the sort of typical biker, likes to admit they're vain. Nobody likes that, especially men in their 40s and 50s and 60s are not going to say that they chose it for how it looks. But really, all bikers are vain because mostly it's a lifestyle thing, right? There's not that many people where riding a motorbike makes practical sense. Maybe for getting through the city or fuel efficiency if you're doing a certain trip. But normally it's cold, wet, damp, and not that much fun. But like a lot of people, they do it because they just think that they look cooler on a bike. And so, yeah, I think it's just a funny thing about the industry, I suppose, that perhaps the most vain group of people are the least likely to admit it. But I'm all right with that.
I actually, in one of my first videos I ever put out, I talked about how, either the number one or number two reason I bought my bike was the way it looked. That was it. I'm a photographer. I think it's the most beautiful bike in my price range and for what I want it to do. And that's why I ended up getting it. Because I don't know, I guess I'm not mechanical enough to rattle off a bunch of stats anyway, like, weight to power ratios or whatever else, that people talk about with the bikes. I just don't really care. For me, it's a fun toy. I had fun on a 125 that I learned on, this little tiny 125 bike that I was putzing around on. To me, it was still a blast. So, I mean, I figure if I can have fun on a 125, I can have fun on, a Harley that's not, putting out crotch rocket type power,
Yeah. And as much as we say, you can get yourself in trouble on some of these other quicker bikes, you can still do the same.
Oh, of course.
Harley, or a Triumph for that matter. So, it's not exclusive to sports bikes, I guess.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let's shift gears a little bit because I'm curious. You started riding a bit later compared to, it sounds like, the other men in your family. Did your mom ride at all, or
no?
And what about your wife?
So my mum used to go on the back of my dad's bike when they first met, and And yeah, I think she quite liked it. They don't really do that now. He just goes out and rides on his own. But yeah, I think she used to ride on the back quite a bit. Although I do remember my dad being a bit sore about the fact that once she melted one of her shoes on his exhaust. Like he still hasn't forgotten that. I'm sure he's forgiven, but I'm not sure he's forgotten. And then my wife, we used to commute together. So her office was on the way to my office. So going through London, we would commute every day. And it was just so much quicker than getting the tube or getting the bus. That as soon as I got the bike and we did like a couple of commutes and it halved her time on transport, she was sold on it. And it was kind of free for her as well. Like I was paying for the bike, but she was getting a lift. And even despite the cold and wet in the winter, it was still much better than being squashed up against loads of other people. And we actually had Bluetooth headsets straight away. So it was actually, half an hour each way of just time to chat and just like see stuff on the way to work. And obviously in London, there's always something kind of happening. We see all sorts of things. So it was super fun. But since we had kids, and commuting is not really a thing now either. So, and my office moved as well. We haven't really done that so much together. But we really, once the kids are big enough to go and stay with their grandparents for a week, hopefully we'll do a couple of trips on the bike, because we, as well as commuting, when we were kid-free, we do occasional weekend trips. There's so many great places to go in the UK, even within a couple of hours of London. And also, it's not even that far down to the Channel Tunnel, and then you're over into France. So one year we went to Bruges in Belgium, which was just, it was the best trip. We loved it. And it's really memorable. I think that's what makes us nostalgic and want to do that again sometime when the kids are able to exist without us for a short amount of time. It was just an hour down to the terminal, and then you load the bike onto the train and it goes in the tunnel under the channel into France, pop up at the other side, and then it was an hour and a half or something to Bruges. And then you have at your disposal the best beer in the world, and lots of it, and like a really beautiful city. And I remember we've managed to find an apartment to stay in a couple of nights that even they would let us roll the bike in through like this huge front door into a courtyard, and then the apartments were around the outside. So there was even good bike parking as well. So
wow.
So yeah, we definitely want to go there again. Although, well, I think we could drink more when we were younger.
That's
we have to take it a bit easier. Yeah, exactly.
So how old is your oldest right now? Kid?
3. She's coming up 3. Yeah.
Okay. Any plans on getting her started on a bike when she's a little bit older? Or?
Well, I mean, you know how, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but the little scooter things for kids, like it's got like little handles and then 2 wheels at the front, 1 at the back, and it's just like a little push along scooter. They've rocketed in popularity over the last 5-10 years. And she's great on that. Surprisingly good. I think because I'm at home working in the week, and then my wife, still being on maternity leave, takes both of them down to the park, and she gets a good hour or 2 of scooting around. So sometimes at the weekend I'll see her ride that, and I'll be like, whoa, she can go down these huge hills really fast, and she's not even 3. and your heart's in your mouth. You're thinking she's going to crash, but she somehow just manages to weave through all the people that are walking in the park. And but for some reason, she has a balance bike, like a bicycle with no pedals or anything. You're just meant to kind of push your legs, and it's meant to be better than a bike with sort of training wheels, stabilizers. Better than doing that, and pedaling is actually having a bike with none of that stuff, but you just push. She just doesn't get it for some reason. I don't know why, but she can't ride the thing. I don't know if I'm sure it's not the wrong size. I've checked. So yeah, I think we've got some ways to go before we then motorize it. That she's got the scooter. Now she needs to learn the balance bike. But I do see on Instagram and stuff, a lot of people buy the small electric motorbikes for their kids and they sort of tear around the garden. So maybe eventually, but I won't force her. I'll let her take her own path. She likes seeing the bikes. She loves when press bikes come, and she pops in the garage occasionally and has a look. And her favorite color is red. So if there's a red one, she gets super excited. And she also likes to help me clean them. So if I'm outside cleaning them before they get taken back, the press bikes, then she'll grab a sponge and she'll muck in. But she's not got the terminology quite right. I think she must have watched something like Peppa Pig if they were cleaning the car and they were talking about the bonnet, or I guess the hood for you guys. So my daughter, she almost always, whenever she cleans the bike, she gets a sponge, she walks to the back and she starts cleaning the license plate, and she just says, like, Daddy, I'll clean the bonnet. And I haven't got the heart to correct her yet. I'm just like, thanks. You're doing a great job.
What did your mother think when you started riding bikes? Because I don't know, was she relieved that she had like one kid that wasn't riding motorcycles and then you ruined it, or was she pretty much like, oh, I hope you have fun?
So it's actually my dad and his two brothers, so my two uncles that had bikes, and then I've just got a sister and she doesn't ride motorbikes. So yeah, I think I don't know what she thought. She will occasionally tell me to be careful if I'm going on a long ride or something. But really, my dad hasn't had a lot of time off of biking. He was riding up until in the middle of his 20s, and then, or something like that. And then when obviously my mum and dad had kids, had me and my sister, I don't think he had any bikes then. I don't know if that was a financial thing or making sure that the house was good and they had the good car for the family and all that kind of thing, or if it was a safety thing, or whether he just didn't really want a bike. But I do remember being pretty small, probably 4 or 5, and he'd bought a cheap Kawasaki 250, and he'd taken it apart in the garage, just putting it back together in perfect condition. He's so good at cleaning bikes, really good at looking after them. He's meticulous. So, and yeah, this kind of like fairly sloppy looking bike was turned into this really cool little bike. And then he started commuting because his work required them to sort of leave their vans at the depot, sort of thing. So, and he got back into it. So he really, I can't think that he had many years off biking. And so really, for my mum, it's probably not a big deal for me to be riding bikes. And it was never really a debate. They don't try and stop me doing things that I want to do either. They're really supportive usually. And then I think as YouTube has grown as well, they've kind of seen how that can lead to some great opportunities, and they're super supportive about that and excited about it. So, yeah, never a problem, but yeah, we'll see. And my wife as well, she's super supportive. Really enjoys seeing how the YouTube stuff goes. So I'm lucky, I think, because that's not the case for everyone's mother and wife and or husband and dad. I think it can be a bone of contention. Have you had a clean?
My mother, my dad had a motorcycle when he was younger. My mother used to ride in the back, and they had an accident once, and she got all banged up. So she was pretty against motorcycles growing up. But my uncle was a biker, and so I've kind of had not bicycles, but I've had motorcycles sort of in my life, kind of. My dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot. So, I was never really around my uncle when he was riding, but he came to visit us a few times, and he was a pretty stereotypical biker. And my dad had a bike at one point again when we lived in New York, but he didn't have it that long, or he didn't ride it that much. But anyway, my mother was really against motorcycles, and it never really bothered me because I was never that interested in them until recently. But then I told her I bought one, and she was not too thrilled. I mean, I'm old enough now that she didn't say a whole lot about it, but I know her well enough. Yeah. And my girlfriend, she doesn't seem to be bothered that I'm riding the motorcycle. She's just like, hey, be careful. You know, that kind of a thing. But I've talked to a number of people, and I always kind of ask what their family thinks about motorcycles. And I know, for instance, Doodle on a motorcycle, I don't know if you've watched her channel at all, but she basically had her mom come visit, and she had to just pretend she doesn't ride motorcycles because she normally commutes to her work. But she just took her car that week while her mom was in because her mom just hates it so much. So yeah, there's definitely varying degrees of parental concern surrounding motorcycles.
Yeah, definitely. And no, I've never had to go to that extent, thankfully. But as the YouTube side has progressed, I think it would get increasingly hard to hide the bikes that I'm borrowing when she visited.
Yeah, especially if someone's like, "Hey, that's Bob. Aren't you MotoBob?"
That thankfully that doesn't happen all that often. You have to be at a very specific motorcycle event, but yeah. In fact, a couple of times only with my dad, we went to one of the motorbike shows in London. So obviously a lot of my subscribers are in London because a lot of my videos are about London. And it was also more like retro custom bikes. And we bumped into a few, like in one whole day of passing by about, 5,000 people, 2 or 3. And, but I still think, my dad thought it was pretty funny.
I mean, it's got to be an interesting experience, right? I mean, because he's known you as just his son for so long, and then to have random people just recognize you from YouTube has got to be just a bizarre experience. To
it's
some
also
extent.
funny because everyone calls me Rob, but I just didn't think Moto Rob sounded right. It just doesn't sound right. So I just went with MotoBob. It just sounded better to me. So anytime I do anything YouTube related, people assume my name's Bob. So
when I saw your when I saw your name pop up in the Zoom chat, it comes through as Rob.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't sure. I said, "Well, does he go by Rob? Does he go by Bob?" It was on my list of things to ask you after I saw that, but now we have it covered. So
exactly, yeah.
I know there's another YouTuber out there, and it's a guy. He goes by John's Moto Garage, and his wife recently started a channel, and she said that she has such a hard time calling him John because he doesn't go by John in real life.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he goes by a completely different name apparently, and she has to constantly correct herself and say John when she's talking to him on the videos.
No way. Interesting. Yeah, I actually only recently subscribed to him, but yeah, he's a big Harley guy, right?
He buys and sells a bunch of bikes. So he's riding a Dyna. He's trying to learn stunting, basically. So he's got a Kawasaki 636 and the Harley Dyna that are his 2 kind of main stunt bikes, and he also uses the DRZ a fair amount to go pop wheelies and stuff around town. He's actually local to me.
That might need to be, actually, that might be better than, what I was talking about, all these different places you can learn to ride. Actually just buying a stunting bike and then finding somewhere you can practice safely is probably really how you're going to find all of the limits of grip and all those kinds of things. That's a good shout. It's cool that he's just like gone after that. But yeah, the video that I watched recently of his that I think popped up in my feed and then I subscribed was his 5 most profitable flips or something. I found that really interesting. But yeah, it's cool that he flips as well, because that's a really smart way to keep the content going through the channel. You were talking about how do you get press bikes? Well, that's a really resourceful way to go about that problem, is don't wait for press bikes, just get good at flipping, and then you make money and also make YouTube content. But you've got to have the time to put into it, I think, to do that. And also you're not going to get the newest bikes because it usually takes a few years for the new bikes to sort of hit the used market, especially at sort of bargain prices. But yeah, still interesting. And you say he's nearby, right?
Yeah, he's right across the valley from me, which is I don't know his exact address, but likely he's 40 minutes or so from the house.
Right.
So,
Oh.
yeah. So before we get too wrapped up, I was curious if you have a favorite bike that you've tested so far.
That's a very good question.
I mean, I assume you love your Triumph since you bought one, but other than that,
I'm gonna have to. I'm literally just clicking to see what everything that I've reviewed recently. I mean, this summer's been great. Me and my friend Tim, we've had a lot of bikes. I just got as many as I could this year and could possibly fit in, and then we go out and the two of us take the two bikes and we swap, so that essentially it means that both of us can film two bikes per day rather than taking one bike on our own and getting one bike. So it's an efficient way to get a lot of sort of review or first impressions videos. So we've had so many this year, and it's been really, really fun, but it does become a bit of a blur. So I can't even think this far back. I'm scrolling through, and things like I rode the Indian FTR 1200 and it was awesome, but it just starts to fade away a little bit. I mean, I really enjoyed the Goldwing a lot more than I thought I would. I just asked for it because I thought it's weird and there'll be something to talk about. It's not a bike that you can get hold of and ride and not really, maybe like, like a middleweight naked bike that doesn't, it's built to a price, and you ride it and you're like, well, it has brakes, suspension, and an engine, but it's fine. You're never going to get a Goldwing and say that. There was a lot going on there. So I was surprised at how much I liked it. And it's one of the bikes where I thought, if money was no object, and I was talking just earlier about potentially when the kids are old enough, like doing some big miles touring and like going into Europe and stuff, two up. That was really, really memorable. And the engine, it's a flat six. There's no other flat six engine on the market. The only other vehicles you get them in are like Porsches and Subarus. So that was super cool. But I think recently I really enjoyed the BMW R9T. I've been meaning to test that for ages. Really surprised at how much I liked it. I really liked the Vitpillen 701 from Husqvarna. That's a single cylinder, really lightweight. And I think, I talked about some bikes being too fast. That's about 75 horsepower, but really lightweight. And for the UK roads, I felt like I was getting everything out of it. And it was going fast enough that it felt fun, but I never felt like it was out of control or dangerous. So that was a fun one. But really, I think out of everything that I've ridden this year, the one that I want to get hold of again and spend a bit more time on was the Triumph Rocket 3. I don't know if you've read up much about it, but it's 2.5 liters, so bigger than any other bike's engine. And it's the most torque of any bike on the market, production bike at the moment. It's like a big Triumph Cruiser. And I just loved it. I just thought it was incredible. And again, much like the Goldwing, you're never going to get a bike like that that's 2.5 liters and that much torque and not find something to say about it. So that's probably, of the bikes that I've ridden this year, the most enjoyable experience I've had of sort of, just a couple of hours with the bike, and it really stuck in my mind.
Yeah, I think the Triumph Rocket 3, if I remember right, it's got sort of a really large looking, a prominent engine on it.
It's mainly engine. The whole bike is a few other things bolted onto an engine.
Okay. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I don't think it's that visually appealing. But I don't know. I think that there would be some sort of a novelty factor to riding on what is essentially a rocket.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I think that the looks of it are definitely more like power cruiser, modern, a bit more like a Ducati Diavel or something than they are the kind of more traditional Harley style. But I don't know. I just don't think the traditional styling would have suited a bike that, Harleys do what they do well. Indians, I really like riding the Indian bikes that I've ridden as well. that more traditional styling. I think it's not really about performance figures. It's about the feeling and the character of it. And I kind of feel like the Rocket suits that more modern aesthetic better than it would an old school look. But I can kind of see, not everyone loves how it looks. And especially if you're into Harleys yourself, then it's probably not your cup of tea, but it's certainly something else to ride for sure. But there's so much coming up as well. Next year that I just can't wait. Now we're getting to the time of year where you can't really, October, November, the press bikes start to dry up and the weather's not great here and there's salt on the road and it's wet. So I'll probably focus more on the news videos and that kind of thing at home. And next year there's going to be a load of great stuff, I think, again, to get out and ride. So that's the fun of it,
I think the Triumph Rocket, I can imagine it would be in like a Christopher Nolan movie, like they blacked it out and threw Batman on it. I could definitely see him on that bike. That's kind of the impression.
Definitely a good call. I think it doesn't actually look that far off the Bat bike. From there was some leaked. Who is it? Robert Pattinson is the new
one, yeah.
There was some leaked footage from the filming. They were filming up in Scotland. I don't know if you saw this, but they had this crazy looking Bat bike, which wasn't, visually it was that kind of style. But the stunt guy dropped it. He was going down a wet cobbled street and the back end just starts sliding and then it just goes flat. It was just taken on someone's phone. I felt for the guy, There aren't many Bat bikes in reserve if you drop them. But you're so right. It had that look about it. So maybe it'd be cool if you got hold of one and then you could get a Batman outfit and see how it looked.
I think, I think that I'm a little bit too maybe rotund Halloween to pull off the Batman look, but maybe by Halloween I'll be less rotund. Who knows?
It's a rotund bike, so it's
not a rotund suit. Maybe with the fake abs, But yeah. So let me let's ask the other way though. Have there been any bikes that have stuck out to you for the wrong reason, where you just didn't, I don't know, either didn't understand why they existed, or you just thought to yourself that it was just not something that you enjoyed riding?
Not enjoyed riding. See, I don't typically make super negative reviews. Like if for a starter, I won't ask to borrow a bike that I don't think I'm going to like. I just don't want to waste my time riding a bike just to slate it. I can look at the specs and some other reviews and think, is this going to be worth my time borrowing it? So I can, do something fun with it and enjoy the experience of creating a video and get like a positive sort of feeling across. So that's why generally there aren't too many negative reviews on my channel. I would say, when you're starting the channel, you will get offered like cheaper bikes to ride. So things like the imported Chinese bikes and the build quality and the level of power on those, it is a bit of a challenge to kind of really be super positive. And you've got to keep in mind that there is a price point. So I might do a little bit less of that sort of thing, especially because the interest isn't the same as like the bigger bikes. And also one thing that springs to mind is like hiring bikes abroad. So I went to India and Nepal for work in the same trip. I did a week in India, a week in Nepal, and but in both Delhi and Kathmandu, I wanted to hire bikes on my day off. I had one day off in each place, just to go and ride. And I had a guide because you can't be getting lost in those places. But obviously the high bikes were Enfields out there, but the old kind of, not the kind of new twins, it was the old singles, the Bullets. But also they weren't really maintained like you would expect a high bike. And those were pretty bad, especially the the one in Delhi, I couldn't kickstart it, and it when it was idling, occasionally it would cut out, and the traffic is so crazy in Delhi that it would eventually, like the guy showed me how to kickstart it, but I'd be kicking it and I'd be like, it's not going. And occasionally, a busy junction, and there was the guide was actually in a car, so he was driving, and then he'd be like, just kind of follow me or I'll follow you, and he would just shout directions and stuff. But he had his son with him. His son would jump out and sometimes kickstart the bike for me. And then eventually towards the end, like a whole day riding around all the sites, and we'd stopped at all these monuments and places like that. Like, I think he just got fed up, and he was like, look, there's a starter button. There was electric start on it. He didn't want to tell me because they said it was bad for the electrics on the bike. Like, there's something a bit dodgy, but all those panicked moments in traffic. I also remember we went to Tenerife, which is like an island just off Africa, but it's Spanish. And there's amazing roads there. That's one of my favorite places I've ever ridden. But we hired a bike there. It was a Kawasaki Versys, like a sort of semi-adventure bike. And it was just so badly maintained. Like, the clutch cable was so dry, bone dry, that when you pulled the clutch in, it wouldn't actually release, like, it would stay there. You let go of the clutch cable, the clutch lever, and the clutch would stay in. And I actually had to sort of hook my fingers either side of the clutch lever to kind of push it. Do you know what I mean? Like, push it back in a bit to get it to engage the clutch again. And the brakes were really bad. I think the throttle cables were dry as well. So that was the same. You actually had to twist it to close it. And after like 2 days, I don't like to cause a fuss. You know, if something's not right in like a restaurant or something, I'll probably just not go back rather than complain. But I had it for a week and I felt like, this is dangerous. So yeah, I had to take it back and just say, look, this bike is unbelievable. I can't believe you sent me out on it. Can I have something else? And they gave me a little BMW that was much better. But those are the two, you know, apart from the small capacity bikes, which can be a bit underwhelming to ride, that even the new ones, especially the cheaper ones, it's those higher bikes that have been the things that have stuck in my mind as horrendous memories of sort of genuinely feeling worried on the road.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I asked the question partially because I know that when you're doing a review like that, you know, you have to really review it based on its purpose and, like you said, the price and everything. But at the same time, you're going to have some personal feelings about, you know, your own subjective idea of, was this fun or not really that fun to ride?
Yeah. And I mean, it depends whether you're purporting to produce like vlogs where it's you and it's your personal opinion, or whether you're trying to produce something that's like a fair reflection of what that bike is from a neutral standpoint. I think the problem is, and you're so right, like, I like retro bikes. I like older looking Triumphs. I like Moto Guzzi's. I like the Harleys that look a little bit more old school. I agree, they look better. There's something about the aesthetic proportions of a motorbike with a metal fuel tank on top and an engine on display and not very much kind of plastic bodywork. But there's only so many videos I can make. Like, if I want to make videos about lots of different bikes, there's only so many times I can get a naked modern bike and say, it was all right, but I think it looks ugly because I like retro bikes. That can't be the conclusion of every single video. And so my personal opinion has to evolve, and I have to see it through the eyes of someone who might be thinking about buying that bike and then try and review it from that perspective. The looks, that's always difficult because looks are completely subjective. Whereas like objectively, some bikes do have bad brakes or a rough ride, or they're slow, or they're choppy on the throttle, or the tech isn't that good for the price point because you know that you can get sat-nav built in on another bike that's cheaper or whatever. So there are those things, but yeah, the looks is always a difficult one. It's always down to personal taste, and I try and keep that in mind. But then again, like I say, I probably wouldn't ask to borrow a bike that I thought was truly ugly, but there are some truly ugly bikes, aren't there? There just are, and so although it's a spectrum, but there are some horrible bikes.
And then some of them, to me, like they make odd decisions for parts on them. Like I watched your video on that BMW recently,
the R18.
I believe so, but it has the gigantic exhaust on it, and to me, the bike itself is really beautiful. And if I bought it, I'd probably just swap out the exhaust and be perfectly happy with it. But straight off the floor, I'm like, I think they did the same thing with the FTR, for instance, right? Where they have this gigantic exhaust and they put gold forks on it. And to me, I'm just not a fan of that combination. But I think that the rest of the bike looks pretty good, other than the fact the FTR's got what I think looks like a Nintendo Switch on top of it for the the display. But anyway, the BMW though is like, it's so beautiful. And then I look at that exhaust and I'm like, I don't even care about exhaust. I'm a Harley guy who doesn't really care about exhaust that much. But I'm looking at that going, I would swap that exhaust like the day after I bought it, and then and then it'd probably be almost perfect.
Well, I mean, it all comes down to emissions, doesn't it? Both
of
noise
course,
and you see now that some bikes where the emissions regulations are getting stricter, but the companies are not really willing to redevelop the whole engine because it's expensive to do that. They're actually just putting more catalyzers into the kind of exhaust system. So I saw a patent for Suzuki doing exactly that. It had perhaps one catalyzer and they put another one in, and it was just like a cheap way to be able to keep selling some of their bikes that they don't really consider worth redesigning. I think perhaps BMW have suffered the same problem there, in that that's a big engine, big capacity, and there's not really, if you think about how it's designed, the cylinder heads at either side, and it's an iconic look to have the exhaust pipes coming out the front and then underneath and then to the back. So if you have to put a big catalyzer to cope with all that emissions, I don't think there's necessarily space to put it. I'm not 100% on this. It may be under the back of the bike and there may be like a box there, but I'm thinking that, they need to be big basically to fit everything in that they need to do to be able to sell the bike. So it is a real shame because it looks better in person than it does in the video and in the photos, but I still agree that it would look way better without them. And I think I'd agree it'd be the first thing I would change as well. But I think unfortunately, same with the FTR, the regulations, they just force them to put these big, horrible things on, and they know you're going to swap them. They know it's the first accessory they're going to sell, and they know that that's an extra £500 to £1,000 on the sale of the bike, and to the point where, like, if you look at the BMW GS, biggest selling bike in the UK, or it was until recently. I think the Royal Enfield Interceptor is now the biggest selling bike in the UK, but the GS was the biggest seller. And now the exhaust that comes as standard is really like a sort of chromey glossy finish that just doesn't suit the rest of the bike. And it almost feels like they're goading the buyer, they're like putting the most ugly thing on because they're like, we may as well make it cheap because we know you're going to swap it and we're going to prompt you to swap it for something in the catalog as soon as possible. So in one sense, I'm sympathetic. They've got regulations to meet. On the other side, selling accessories and parts, it's big business for them. And so they're going to push you towards that anyway. And Harley started that, I reckon.
I mean, you can't argue that Harley, even if they didn't start it, they certainly helped popularize it. And I will give this to BMW. They at least tried to make something out of the exhaust, because the FTR, in my mind, I don't even think they tried to make that look attractive. But the BMW, I can see they at least approached it with an eye for design. I just don't care for what they did with it. And then the FTRs, they were just like, let's throw something on the back that meets the regulations, and they'll swap it later. You know,
the Akrapovic, there's an aftermarket Akrapovic option which looks decent, but I think the thing that disappointed people about the FTR was the original concept that got people really excited. Looked so close to a proper flat track race bike, and it had those high level pipes, that flat track racing bikes have. And so obviously people wanted that. And then when it had these low level pipes and they had to be bulky, then yes, they're a disappointment. But I believe, and I think I read this, that they said that those high level racing pipes, if you want to go and ride for like a couple of hours on a warm day and you're not going as fast as a racer will, they're so hot against your legs. And this is so true. I've borrowed the Triumph Scramblers, the 1200 and the 900, and ridden them around central London to do some filming with them. And at town speeds of 20 miles an hour, 10, 20, 30, and then you stop in traffic in the summer, they are really, 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 really hot on your legs. So I think that was a big design decision for them, and it's a shame to compromise it. But on the other hand, if they'd have put those high level pipes on, all the reviewers would have said it's too hot. It runs too hot on your legs and it's really uncomfortable. And so it's a difficult thing. But I do believe S&S make, it's not an official Indian accessory, but S&S do make a high exhaust kit for the FTR. So it looks pretty amazing. S&S Shotgun, I think it's called, the particular model. So you can get that look again. Maybe that's what you're looking for.
I am sympathetic because it's really easy to poke holes in someone else's design, and it's much harder to come up with something that meets all the different requirements, whether it's price, emissions, looks. I mean, there's so many different factors that people have to consider when they're developing something like that. So, I do have some sympathy for them, and I don't want to give them too hard of a time about it. It was just, in Indian's case specifically, I think that they do such a good job making so many beautiful, beautiful bikes that when the FTR came out, it was just that kind of contrast where, you stick an FTR next to any other bike in the Indian shop and you're like, are they made by the same people?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a tough one, but it is a good fun bike to ride. I agree. The screen, I mean, that's another thing, isn't it?
That's subjective.
It does have settings that you can change. So how you administer those settings through analog clocks is a question. It does make it easier, and also they probably knew that reviewers would say for this price, a lot of other bikes have TFT screens, so at least they offer the cheaper model with the analog clocks. But yeah, it's not everyone's cup of tea. But yeah, I think it's a good looking bike overall, the FTR. I think it's just a couple of bits like that. And this is always the thing as well with both the R18 and the FTR, it's these huge expectations that are set by the concept bikes that then lead to a bit of disappointment from the punters when something that's had to be, shaped into something sellable, comes out, then it can be a bit disappointing. But that's just the way it goes. Concepts are meant to be like that. They're meant to get your interest and show you what they can do design-wise. But it can be a shame. And those are probably two of the biggest examples of that recently.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, every person that I've basically talked to who's ridden an FTR has said what a great experience it was. So they obviously did a lot right with the FTR. And your review seemed really positive about the BMW. And again, I think the BMW looks fantastic except for the exhaust. And if I didn't have the Harley and I had unlimited funds, I might go and pick one of the BMWs up with the understanding that I'd mod it somehow. So
yeah, I think this is just the beginning for that bike. And yeah, I was quite positive. I think it's unusual. It's an unusual bike. Like you'll never see anything configured like that apart from BMW. Even the Japanese manufacturers, when they make their big cruisers to try and take a slice of that huge market in the US, they'll knock out a V twin, and I think it's cool that BMW just kept it BMW, and it's a weird bike, but it does kind of work. But this is just the first edition. There's going to be touring bias versions with luggage and a big screen, and obviously the first iteration of most bikes, they do improve upon it and tweak things and bring in more tech in the next iteration. So one gripe, I had two gripes. One is no fuel gauge and one is no cruise control, which is just crazy for a bike of that price, £20,000, intended for those kinds of distances. So I think the best of it is to come, and I really only had a couple of hours with it, so I'll make a proper comprehensive review when I get a chance to get hold of one for longer. But really, I'm excited to see what they do with it next.
Yeah, me too. I've always been a fan of BMW cars. Not like a fanboy where I could list off every model, but I definitely love the way they look. And my one of my former bosses she used to lease BMWs, so every 3 years or so she would swap them out, and I'd get a chance to ride in them. And they were just always the fit and finish and everything about them was so nice. And I think I was going to mention, I think that video is the one where you did like the slow-mo of it shaking back and forth, right? Or is that a different one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was really cool. I like that shot.
It's quite something when it starts up, it does have that wiggle. But yeah, I love a lot of stuff that they do, and I like the cars as well. But I was going to ask you, you said you like the look of the cars as well, and the kind of fit and finish. And yeah, I've always enjoyed it. We only recently got a car because of the kids, but living in central London, whenever we needed a car, we would just hire one. It's cheaper for us to just hire one for a weekend. And not own a car. And even if we spent, a couple of grand over the year hiring cars, it'd probably be cheaper than owning one, especially in central London, because the insurance and parking and stuff is expensive here. So, and we got BMWs a lot from the hire car company because I went so regularly that we got quite friendly, and they had quite a few in the fleet, from the big expensive ones right down to the kind of entry level ones. And I always really, really liked them. But there's a real division now, isn't there, with the new grill style, the huge kidney grills. I didn't know if you've seen those and what you think of them.
I thought they were getting smaller. I haven't seen the 2021s or ones.
You really have to just, if you've got your computer there, just put 2024 series and go on Google Images.
Oh my. All right. So to me, they're leaning, this is like the force. So I don't know. It almost looks like they're leaning towards like Maserati or Jaguar or something in the shape now.
Yeah, they've literally taken, that grille was the height of the headlights before, and now they've just pulled it right down to the floor. So really it kind of, I think the idea is it references, how those grills used to look 80, 90 years ago on their original cars, where it would be the length of the front of it. And that's something with the R18 as well. They're referencing older bikes, the R5 that was nearly as old as that as well.
What I'm noticing
this is
here,
a bit of a weird look there, isn't it? And a lot of people don't like it.
Well, what I'm noticing is that the photography seems to matter a fairly substantial amount, because some of these 4 series, even with the big grille, don't really look that bad to me. But the ones where it's kind of more head on and you can really see that grille, that's where I'm just like, oof, I don't know if I like that. Who knows? It's still a BMW, and you ride on the inside of it, but
that's true. I don't know. Honestly, I think about this. I think the guys who design BMWs they must be at the top of their game. And because you don't get a job there doing that if you're not cutting edge. And I think they know what's coming next. They're designing something that's pushing forward on what cars are going to look like next. And I think people just aren't really ready for it, because it is like it looks strange at first. But what I will say is they've released a couple more. They released the M3 and M4 just last week, and they look similar. They've got this new design language, and you see those cars and you're like, oh, they've got the big grille again. And then you see them next to the previous generation with the small grille, and it looks dated. And actually these look modern and a bit more edgy. And so I think really, like, it's, they know what they're doing. They know how to design great looking cars. They know what the flavor is at the moment and where they want to take the brand. It's just that people aren't ready for it. And actually, probably in a year or two's time, like, people will get used to it and look back on the old cars and think they look out of date and a bit lame, perhaps.
Well, they've kept the lines, I mean, the skeleton that, you've come to love with BMW is definitely there. But, the thing is that the grille almost reminds me of the Dodge Hemis.
I don't know what that is. We don't get those. We have a look.
It's a gigantic, cars and trucks. But for a while, in I think the 2010s or something, they had this giant grill.
Like the Ram, you mean?
Yeah, the Ram. But the Hemis were also in their maybe like
wow, yeah,
a car that looks like the Chrysler 300, but I forget what it's actually called for Dodge.
Yeah, it does look a little bit like that. It's like a big nose, isn't it? It's like it just looks like a face with a huge nose, and that's what the BMWs look like as well. I'd really recommend subscribing rather to there's a guy called the Sketch Monkey on YouTube, and he is a talented sketcher, car sketcher. I don't know what he does as a day job, but he's great at kind of just photoshopping and manipulating car designs to show his ideas. And that it's a really fun channel to watch, because he'll do a video that's like, what's actually wrong with the new BMW 4 Series, and he won't correct the grille so much. It'll be about the lines and stuff, and he just uses Photoshop to manipulate it and get it into a shape that he thinks looks better. And like, he's not always right, and I'm sure he knows that, but it's still fun to watch somebody just kind of like put some of those ideas into life. So definitely worth a watch if you like car design. And I think he's done a couple of bikes over the years, although it's not really his main thing.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I mean, I've got a mild interest, I would say, in cars.
Same. I mean, we have a Volvo, so.
Well, I've got a Tacoma.
All right. Yeah, priorities change when you have kids. You just go for something that's got a lot of space, and that's about it. Although I don't know, I think a Tacoma looks kind of fun. To me that looks kind of that looks kind of like really American to me, even though obviously it's not American, but like we don't really get that style of we don't get trucks like that over here, so people don't really drive that sort of thing. The roads are too small. It would be like impossible to park it, basically.
Oh yeah.
Everything's smaller here.
So I think recently I've been seeing just like a lot of the review stuff, but you mentioned that you're going to be kind of transitioning into more news coverage as the riding season ends over there. So I guess I'm curious, and this is kind of just switching tack again. I'm obviously I've got a strong interest in Harley because I own a Harley and I enjoy their bikes. But I also am sort of deeply interested in what's going on the business side with Harley. And I'm curious what you think they should be doing to turn things around, and like what direction would you, if you had your druthers, what would you have them do to make them profitable again?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a shame we can't see those two CEOs kind of play out in parallel universes, right? Because I can't remember the names, but the previous guy who had the Bronx in the works and, you know, started the project with the Pan America, and they had the 1250 Custom, and this more rose to Harley, right, idea. You know, I would like to have seen him kind of follow that through and everyone get behind him and really push on and see if actually branching outside of cruisers, looking at other markets, and yeah, seeing what else they can do, whether they can take market share from other places would have played out versus this, you know, new approach of like cutting back and just focusing on that core audience. I mean, ultimately, you know, the Harley customer base is aging, and any video that I make, my audience is definitely younger than the average Harley customer. My biggest age group, I think, is 25 to 35. And anytime I post videos about the sort of big Indians, the big Harleys, and they're £30,000 or whatever, people always pick up on that. They're just like, well, I could buy a car, like a pretty nice car for that. And it's just not really attainable. So I'm not really sure how you address that problem of an aging customer base, but not really being accessible to a younger audience. So I guess the idea to put out a naked bike is kind of an obvious one. The two biggest markets in Europe have to be adventure bikes and naked bikes. And so it just makes sense to go after some of those, those buyers. I don't know if it's the same in the US really, but I'm not quite sure that still the Bronx would have had what it took to tempt people away from the naked bikes that they ride here. Like something like an MT-07, for example, which is, the Yamaha, is so cheap. It's like £7,000 and the performance is unreal. So for younger riders who want a bit of a thrill and keep up with their mates, it's going to be hard to get anywhere near that for a Harley. And then if you are going to spend more and you're, maybe a bit older, so you've got a bit more money, for that price that you'd be looking at for the Bronx, you can get things like the KTMs and the Ducatis and even some of the Triumphs, the Speed Triple, that kind of thing. And the performance is nowhere near. So I just don't know if it could have done it. And that's why I'm really excited that the Pan America is still going to come out. I know people don't necessarily like how it looks, a lot of people, but I do. I love it. I think it's really bold. I like the idea that they had. They said they wanted to make the Jeep of motorcycles, essentially. It had to be different from a Harley. It couldn't be all chrome and, kind of retro styled. It had to be a modern adventure bike, but it still had to be American. And like, there's nothing more American than like a Jeep. So I love that rationale and why they tried to do that. I love the width of the front of it. But again, adventure bike market, the 1250 GS or 1200 GS before it from BMW, it's dominated for years. And to change those buyers' habits with the Harley, it just seems like such a tall order. I just hope it does succeed, and then they can branch out into other styles of bike. Because there were designs patented for a cafe racer, for a flat tracker to compete with the FTR, even though the FTR hasn't sold that well, I don't think. So it feels like we were going to see all different types of bike from them. Now that's not going to happen unless the Pan America is a real success, in which case it might help them to justify going after other styles of genres of bike. The other outcome is that it doesn't do well, and then they stick to making the kind of expensive cruisers, and they sort of like double down on that and really focus on it. And then to become profitable, I suppose, if your audience is aging, there's no way to really grow that audience. You can't really make the bikes more expensive to get more revenue because they're already pretty expensive. maybe they can, then I guess you have to cut costs. And they tried manufacturing outside of America to make things cheaper over here, for example. And that hasn't gone well. Like politically, it didn't go well with their customers in the US. It's a difficult situation they're in. What do you think of the 338 made in maybe it's not in India, it might be Thailand or China, but the single cylinder little bike.
It was going to be China.
But it's made just to sell in Asia, right? So we probably won't see it here. But what do you make?
It's cancelled.
Is it cancelled as well?
Yeah, they're pulling out of India. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that, but I didn't know that meant that it was.
Well, I think they announced prior that, or maybe it was just a rumor site, but I read somewhere that they were not going to be making the 338 anymore, and that just this week I saw that they're pulling out of the Indian market. So I think that it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to make that bike anymore if they're not going to be trying to compete in India.
Yeah, I saw a leak just a couple of days ago though of like it in the flesh, and it is to be built in China. Yeah, I'm just looking now. It is China. So I don't know if I haven't read that it's definitely cancelled. You might be right. It might be just a rumor site. But the latest thing I saw was literally a couple of days ago.
Unless they think they're just going to sell it in China now. Maybe. I haven't heard anything about their strategy as far as China is concerned. But my understanding with that bike was that it was going to be for like the Southeast Asia kind of.
So, but do you feel like, because obviously it's built on an existing Chinese bike that they were making for Benelli. So it's nothing new and it doesn't really have the visual style of a Harley. Like, do you feel as a Harley owner that cheapens the brand, or do you feel differently about that?
I think that I don't know that it would be really an opinion that it cheapens the brand. I mean, it certainly does. Because it is so cheap, and it's not a true Harley. Because if you think about the way Harley owners think, one of their biggest points of pride with Harley is that it's been sort of there's a direct lineage from the time that it was created to now, unlike Indian, which is one of the biggest criticisms of Indian. Like, it's not an Indian, it's a Polaris, right? It's a Victory, it's a whatever. And so I think depending on your audience, so if you're looking at the US market and how we would see it, I mean, certainly it cheapens the brand. I think Zeitz would see it that way too. Like his strategy with Puma was all about creating a more premium product for a more premium price and going after premium customers. He didn't really target people who didn't want to spend a lot of money on gear, So, I made a video about it already, but it's sort of my opinion that that's the route he's going to go. He's going to be trying to make Harley's value proposition match the pricing. And then target customers with money versus a specific age group. And I think that the reason that they're keeping the ADV bike is that it aligns with their marketing and values of freedom more closely than like the Street Fighter would, and I think that also he's trying to cut costs. You see, you can't have that many models and be profitable. So I don't know. I think I'm optimistic just because of how well he did with Puma. And I think that, it's a tough world. If you try to compete based on price, then it's always going to be a race to the bottom. So I think the value added stuff that I believe he's going to focus on is probably the best way to go. Not to mention, I think that he's going to end up doing a lot of branded products. You're going to be able to buy Harley, I don't know, Harley bubblegum or something soon, but.
Yeah. It's a tough one, isn't it? Really, I think a lot of that stuff, like the branded products, if you're really into your bikes, it's sort of. I don't know if that cheapens the brand, but it kind of it starts to make it a bit corny after a while. And then of course the 338 does to some extent cheapen it, but it's always difficult to reconcile like whether you want your favorite company to be true to itself and run itself into the ground, or whether you want it to survive by adapting and doing stuff that you maybe isn't totally aligned to kind of what you would want them to be doing. The thing, I make a lot of Triumph videos and I get a lot of comments about the fact that they're now made in Thailand. All of their manufacturing's moved there. And to me, it's just like, look, it's not, their prices would be so much higher if they were produced in the UK. And ultimately that they wouldn't be competitive. And therefore, like, I just don't really think it's like a money grabbing move from them to move the production to Thailand. It's their own plants, so it's the same quality control. I just, it's a tough one, but it seems to really, really matter to some people, and it matters less to me. I'd rather see them be a modern global business and still exist and make the bikes that I still enjoy riding, rather than on some principle of like where it's made. But I do also understand, and I think it's the same for Harley. Triumph and Harley are two brands that really, in their marketing, they leverage their nationality. So there are endless parts for Triumphs that you can buy with Union Jacks, and even some of the specials that they make, they have the Union Jack in the paintwork. Same with, Harley and the kind of association with America and the way that they brand it. You'll see a lot of, eagles and you do see the flag in a lot of the stuff. It is a bit, I think for Triumph specifically, I haven't thought about it too much with when Harley moves some manufacturing overseas, but I've seen it more closely with Triumph. And I think that's probably what annoys people more, is that pretends to be truly British. It is British designed and the history of the company is British, but then to manufacture it elsewhere, I think that just really doesn't sit well with people. And personally, living here, it doesn't really, it's not that appealing to me to have like Union Jacks on my bike anyway. Like I'm not really that bothered. So what I would rather them do is be a global company and work that angle less, work that UK angle less. They don't need to put that so much in the market in here, I guess. Like maybe it's a good thing in when they're selling overseas to say like, oh, this is like a UK brand. But I'd personally just be happy to see them make great bikes, make them in Thailand at a competitive price so they can, a competitive cost so they can sell them at a competitive price, and just not really have to be so over the top with the national stuff so that it doesn't, feel so off to people. That would be my preference.
It's an interesting thing because it's kind of like food, food, clothing, all these different things that are part of someone's culture. They become really important to people, and even like regional ways of doing things, someone else does it differently, then it's not the real way to do it, and all these things. And I think that to some extent, motorcycles and cars and different brands, they kind of become part of the culture. And so people become protective of them because it's not just that it's a motorcycle brand, it's that it is a British motorcycle brand. And it's part of your culture to make these Triumph motorcycles, right? And then so it's almost like the company is just telling people, hey, we're not going to be part of your culture anymore. Now we're part of the world's culture. And, I know you have some nostalgia and some fond memories of things, but too bad, so sad. We want to be the world's product now. And I think a lot of people have a problem with globalization in general because of that. It's like their identity gets slowly chipped away, and you no longer have any kind of British or American companies. You just have global companies. And so
I think it's also more, it's harder for people to take at times when the economy is not great. We're going into like period of economic instability now. And when jobs are you know, disappearing, let's say, and it's harder and harder for some people to find a job, then to see a company that leverages your country's image and brand, but then you know, so they're trying to profiteer off the flag and the kind of idea that it's British, but then when like push comes to shove, like those jobs aren't being created here, perhaps that also kind of is upsetting. I think if everybody's happy and the economy's doing great and everyone's got jobs and, you know, unemployment's as low as it possibly could be, then maybe it's easier to swallow them. But right now, you know, maybe it doesn't look as good to have that. But that's just a supposition from reading the comments and kind of trying to get an idea for it. Yeah.
Oh, you know, that's the thing about a complicated situation is there's going to be a plethora of opinions out there on it, you know, and it's really hard to know what the dominant one is because it all really depends on your group of friends to some extent, like what you're hearing the most or what newspapers you read. You know,
I mean, that's one of the good things about, you know, starting a YouTube channel. You get to hear people willingly will offer their opinions in the comments, and you have the joy of reading them all. And then normally none of them are your friends. So, you know, you get all sorts of different, I find it super interesting sometimes just to click on like somebody's profile and just see their picture a little bit bigger. And you're like, who are these people, you know? Because you zone out of them being actual people behind the comments sometimes. You just respond to a few and then you move on. Whereas sometimes if I see a comment or that's a little bit funny or maybe a view that perhaps I don't share, and so I'm kind of interested at like what kind of person they might be. I just love to try and think of, you know, what's that person like? What's their life like? Where are they coming at that from? And so, yeah, you definitely get exposed to a lot of different opinions and ideas.
Yeah, the internet is definitely a ripe breeding ground for a variety of opinions and ideas, and people willing to share them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they definitely are.
So, all right. Well, it's getting kind of late where you're at, I think now. What is it? 10 or 11?
11. Yeah.
Oh, my. Well, yeah. I think we should probably wrap it up then. And
yeah, but like as discussed earlier, my children, you know, if I stay up much later and think, well, I'll just lie in, they'll have other ideas. They'll be up at 6 or 5:30 or something, I'm sure. So probably a good idea. Prudent to end it now, probably. Yeah, get myself to bed ASAP.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
All right, Rob. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you'd like to see more from MotoBob, you can find him on YouTube under MotoBob. You can also visit his website, which is motobob.cc. And of course, he also has an Instagram, which is also MotoBob. See you guys next week.